Welcome back to the True Roots podcast, where men find their true identity in Christ through surrender and obedience. And just excited to be back here again with Dan today. Mm-hmm. And we were talking a little bit off camera just about some of the things that have been stirring in your heart. And you were sharing a story about something that happened this week. And I just wanted to let you get into it. Start there.
Yeah. So context, I'm thinking a lot about evangelism. Mm-hmm. And I shared a little bit last week about the desire to, particularly with this group of guys I play basketball with.
Yeah.
And was on mission on Monday, like just going after it, trying to pursue that. And our church was doing this prayer and fasting 3-day window together. And we had a prayer night each night. And I went to that on Monday night. And sat down and just felt like I needed it, right? Like I felt like I had been expending myself for the kingdom.
Yeah.
And just felt really comforted by being there. And I got this picture in my mind of like a cozy, warm living room, like a cabin kind of style. Feels a little Shack-esque, but not Shaquille O'Neal, The Shack book.
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
And Jesus is there, like fireplace. It's where I was supposed to be. It's comfortable, and it feels like rest. And I was processing that just during that prayer time, and I felt like God just kept working that whole picture out in my mind a little bit in regards to evangelism and why it was good. And the rest of the picture was that Jesus didn't stay there because he hasn't come back yet. Like the work's not done. You know, there's still people who he's called by his name, and Jesus is still leaving the 99 to go after the one. And so if I want to stay and abide with Jesus, right? Like, and I stay in the cabin, but Jesus goes out during the day. If I want to be with him, I got to go.
Yeah.
And the other thing that I was processing, I felt like God was saying is, you can stay. Like, you can stay here in the cabin. That's fine. Like, you're my child. It's done. It's finished. But it's going to be familiar and it's going to be less rich, right? Like when you go out with Jesus and you expend yourself for the kingdom, and you're pushing against the comforts of the world, and the world is uncomfortable for you.
Yeah.
This feels like rest. But when you stay here, it becomes familiar, and the rest that you don't need the rest, right? Like it's just is a comfortable place to be. And I was like, oh, that's why I feel this way right now. And this is life with Jesus, life with God, life in his presence is deeper and more restful when I've expended myself pushing against the comfort. I'm not finding my comfort in the world, but I'm working against, and fighting against, more than a conqueror. Then I can rest, in those moments in a richer way.
Yeah, as you're talking, it's bringing up a question for me I wanted to ask is that, do you think some of that rest that you find in Jesus in those times and that more rich experience is because your level of depth with him and how you know him is deeper when you're walking out in the world together and you have to walk in that discomfort and get to know him more and trust him more and all of those things? Do you think that brings more of that depth?
100%. Yeah, I have a few experiences of that in my life. One, when I was, we would go do No Fear evangelism. My high school and college group at our church would go to San Diego every summer with other churches from around the country, and we'd stay at Point Loma University, and mornings would be apologetics, evangelism, classes, training, and then we'd go out to the beaches. This is around 4th of July, so it's just slammed. Beaches, Balboa Park, and in pairs, go just start having conversations with people. And you'd be expending yourself, right? For the kingdom, trusting the Lord, I don't know what's going to happen today, and come back and worship in the evening. And it was that's probably one of the best worship experiences I've ever had, because you're just on fire. You're living into the kingdom, you know? And then I remember coming back I spent a year overseas after college, and I'd gone through this season of somewhat indifference post returning to the United States, where I wasn't anti-God, but I just didn't it. I didn't have much of a feeling at all. And the thing that broke that was deciding I'm going to go pursue my neighbor. And we started doing these like fire pit nights my buddy and I went around and invited our neighbors and like did fire pits and like tried to talk about the gospel. And that was what got me to the point where I was like, God, I need you. Like I was no longer indifferent.
Yeah.
You know, it's because when I'm living for the gospel and advancing the gospel, I like cannot do that on my strength. And I'm very conscious of that because I'm running into the world in a very like head-on way.
Yeah.
And the world is strong. Like the devil and the world are stronger than me on my own.
Yeah.
And I like have to have God if I'm going to like live in that place. And I think absolutely. Like it's so much richer because I'm so much more dependent.
I think that's it right there, right? You're so much more dependent, and it causes us to draw in ourselves and to reach into him ourselves. And so it just brings that experience. It brings that time with your father where you're like, Dad, I need you. And I can't do this on my own strength. And so as you walk into that, I think when we walk into the world and we do that and we go and we reach out to people and we're talking to people, and it is scary, right? It's uncomfortable. There is a rub there, especially as we're denying ourselves. We have to wrestle with that in terms of sharing the gospel and sharing Jesus. And so it just brings this richness and this depth to the relationship and a trust. I think that's a big thing too, is as we go out into the world and we start to share and we start to step into who God's called us to be, we also start to learn that the things that he says are true in actuality.
Yeah, you don't just like know them in your head. You're like experiencing his faithfulness.
Yeah, because we could sit, like you said, we can sit in that spot.
Yeah.
We can sit and be with our dad. We can sit and be with Jesus. That's good. But we won't know him to the depth of who he fully is until we step into it and see that, what he says is true. Mm-hmm. He will be with us. He will comfort us. He will give us the strength to be more than conquerors. He will show up in our weakness. I think one of the fun things with the Lord is when we think we failed, and you're like, oh man, I just screwed that whole thing up. And then he still does something crazy from it. Like, oh yeah, his strength really is perfect in my weakness. Like it's go do it and be obedient, and he's going to do it. He's going to show us how to do it. And really the power's all going to come from him, but we have to step out into that. Totally. And we have to take those steps and choose to step into that obedience. And then as we do that, we're going to go back into that restful time with him and be much more grateful and thankful. But there's just going to be a richness to it that's different than when we haven't done it before. And I think a big thing that you're talking about in there too is just to not sit in safety, to not sit in this comfortable spot. And I think that in church in general, the Christian walk, especially in America, is comfort.
Yeah.
Sadly, like it's not supposed to be. That's not, and this isn't like a big call out to churches, but I think that's what I remember growing. Like it wasn't this big. And so when we go do those things, we go to these places where they call us to evangelize. I mean, when I think about evangelism and going to do that, something like in here starts to go, I don't really want to do that. Mm-hmm. And I think that should be something that starts to dissipate as we start to step into it. But if we haven't stepped into it, the things that are the most uncomfortable are the things that we've never stepped into, right?
Generally,
the things that we're most afraid of are the things that we haven't taken a step towards. But as you start to step into it, it gets less scary. And especially when you know that God's going to step in there with you. Yeah. But I wanted to ask this question based off of that is, how did you start stepping into that? How did you start taking those risks? And what were maybe your first steps within evangelism to be able to risk your comfort, to get into the arena, so to speak, with the Lord? And then how has he started to kind of increase that we talked on episode 1 about obedience and how once you do it once, it's going to be more
snowball.
and more. Yeah.
Well, it's a little bit like building a muscle, I think, where if you've never trained that muscle group in your walk with the Lord, you can't expect, and you shouldn't expect, that you're going to be able to rep out, 10 reps at a high weight. Like, it doesn't work that way. Yeah. You have to start incrementally growing it. And I think that when I was in high school doing that stuff, going on that trip and deciding this is why I'm going and what I'm doing it for with a bunch of other people really helps. Like, there's a bunch of accountability, there's some excitement and energy, and there's a determined purpose for that time.
Yeah.
That gives you no excuse. There's a church here locally that decided for 3 days they were going to go just like be at Walla Walla Park. And the whole reason they were there was to have conversations with other people. And it's like, well, when you're there and if you're not doing it, like you're wasting your time, right? Because that was the purpose of why you went there.
Yep.
Versus like, I think a lot of times we think, oh, I'm just going to do it about my day. But then your purposes are different. And so it's just, it's easy to make it not the point. Whereas Jesus kind of tries to put it as the point. And so I think until you've developed the muscle in that context, it's going to be really difficult. And you have to make it purposeful. You have to go to the gym to build the muscle. And I think you have to set up rhythms. I've had to set up rhythms in my life to do that. And I find that like accountability is probably the greatest way for me to do that, which is like, okay, hey, so-and-so, I feel like I want to do this. Will you do it with me? Rachel and I, my wife, wanted to pursue our neighbors and have like these neighborhood hangout things. And we just kept not doing it. We had like met people but that specific thing hadn't happened. And I was like, why don't we just like, we have some of these neighbors that are Christians. We should ask them to do it with us. And then once we did that, well, now we have to do it because we just said we want to do this. And it made it so much better to do it with people.
Yeah.
And so I think that's part of it too. I don't know any other way, truthfully, to start it. I mean, I'm sure there is, but without someone else.
Yeah.
And that's what we talked about last week. Like, come do it with me. Don't put it on your own initiative. And when you have someone with you in your corner, along with the Holy Spirit, it feels so much more doable.
Yeah.
It's like, okay, I'm not crazy. Like I know someone is here with me who's like agreeing with the things I'm saying and in support, and you're not like believing these lies that the devil's trying to put in your brain, during that time. And anyways, kind of rambling, but I think it's community and building the muscle incrementally.
Yeah, and I'll just share a story off of that because, in the Bible where it talks about where two or three are gathered, he is there. And it talks all the time about going out and doing those things. He had 12 disciples, and they would go out together, and do those things. And so I think that's just a critical piece. But in my stories, we're talking about the gym. When I first started working out and losing weight, because I lost a lot of weight, is I had a mentor that gave me help and direction, but I was working out on my own, and I had lost about 80 pounds, and I was ready to be toast. Like, I was done. I did not want to keep going. And then I got invited into the Leaf Gym community here in town by Kyle, and it changed everything because now I had a community that I was walking in it with and was able to keep going. And I think that just is one of those things is we try to do a lot of things on our own.
Yeah.
And it just makes it harder.
It's not as sustainable.
Yeah, and that's the truth too. It's not sustainable because we will get discouraged. We will have difficulty. In this world you will have trouble. Those things are all true, and we're supposed to walk these things together. And then also just in the initial, like you're talking about, and we were talking about this for I don't know how long with your wife and not doing it.
Yeah.
And so even just in that initial piece,
Probably a year.
Was yeah. And which is great. Like that just happens though.
Yeah.
We do that because, and so once you had the accountability or you decided, hey, we're going to do this together, it probably started pretty quickly, I would imagine, after that.
Oh yeah. Like we made a plan.
Yeah.
Like basically we talked to him and was like, okay, what's our plan?
Yeah.
Let's do it.
Yep.
Yeah.
And it just goes. And so I think too, going back to that gym analogy is just getting started in the initial stages. A lot of times that momentum takes a little bit to get going, but it's also really uncomfortable in the beginning. We talk about the gym, you're going to feel really sore in the beginning, especially. But once you get into it and you start going, like there'll be soreness as the muscles grow, but your body will start to adapt and get used to it. And that's the same thing with your mind and spirit with the Lord is as we step out and go, we'll be able to step out into deeper things and into more things with him because we're starting to grow. That muscle's growing with him. That trust really is what it is, right? That reliance on him, understanding his voice, knowing what he's saying, and just less fear because our fear is actually in him. And so we don't have to fear. I think one of the verses that, I think it was a verse of the day this week, because I usually check that before my reading, but it was like, fear not, I am with you. And he holds my right hand. Like he's constantly leading, but we don't really know that until we step out and then actually see that he is leading and he is in it, you know?
Yeah. Yeah. It's like that Indiana Jones movie where he's got to find the cup. I forget what that one's called. But anyway, Holy Grail.
Yeah.
And he gets to the end and it's like the bridge of faith or something. It's this chasm, but the bridge is there and he's supposed to just take this step and trust, you know? And I think that in a way is the picture that is put in front of us with faith is like, there's this chasm. Do you trust me to like sustain you in the going? It doesn't make sense, right? It seems like it's not going to work, but like, okay, God, I trust you. And it feels like this with a lot of spiritual disciplines and habits and things where I'm like pursuing the Lord. I'll do it after some like wrestling and tension or like after just a season of not. And I'll be like, this is the best thing ever. Why don't I do this more? And I'll tell myself, I'm doing this all the time. And then, 2 days later, I'm like, well, I haven't done that since I said I was going to do that. What's up with me? It's like, I don't know. There's just a real,
it's not abnormal.
Real resistance, you know, like
absolutely.
The devil is real and there's a resistance to the things that our soul knows are good for us. And it's like, how do you build some momentum in these things and build the muscle? I think I heard someone say it. The analogy that like, your spiritual life also is like your physical in the sense that you have all these different muscle groups. And if you only train, your upper body and you got chicken legs, like you're going to have back problems. You're going to have all this stuff and you have your bad knees. And same thing is true in your spiritual walk. Like if you only read your Bible and you only pray, 100% you're going to like know the truth of God and you're going to have a relationship with him. But like there's other elements of the walk with Jesus that you're not training and are going to be depleted.
100%.
And and so it's like, this is a piece of it. It's not the whole thing.
No.
But you should be, training the muscle.
Yeah. Absolutely. Absolutely. And oh my goodness. So good. Cause I think that's a trap I fall into actually is I'm going to read my Bible and I'm going to pray. And then God's like, hey, can you step out?
Yeah.
Like, can you go do the thing?
Yeah.
And it can be easy to just step into one or two of these things and he just consistently calls us to...
It's always chest day.
Yeah. It's always, always chest day, no leg day. Actually, I like the legs, but if we're talking spiritual life for sure, it's just those things. And so we don't step into the fullness of what he has for us. And that it really is, I think you speak to a good point there, is that it is really habits and disciplines, right? We have to create these things in our lives, these rhythms, that really God is creating these rhythms, but we have to choose to step into them and step into what those rhythms look like. And it reminds me even of you talking about giving your whole life to the Lord. If I'm going to surrender my whole life to the Lord, what does that look like? And you talked about it within finances, but it's the same thing in this, where if I'm going to give my whole life to the Lord, then what are the rhythms that I need to be able to do that on a daily basis and a consistent basis? And that's going to be uncomfortable.
Yeah.
A lot of times really uncomfortable. And I think that in the Christian walk, having a motto in our own lives of, hey, I'm going to choose discomfort. I'm going to choose to do that because it should be uncomfortable.
Yeah.
Like the walk should be uncomfortable because we're dying to ourselves. Death is not a comfortable process.
Well, and like in the world but not of the world would imply that there's a friction.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
So
100%.
Yeah.
100%.
Yeah, it's I think it's a good like smoke detector for us to go, how comfortable is my life?
Yeah.
Just like that measure, the barometer of comfort. And if it's, 10 out of 10 comfortable, like that's a smoke detector. It's not like oh no, I've lost the Lord, but it's hey, pay attention, like let's reorient some things. Yeah. And it just serves as a good, like healthy check-in. Because I think the temptation is to like be a certain way and act a certain way and to hear like, oh, I need to have healthy habits and all this stuff, and then just change your behavior, right?
Yeah.
Like
Oh,
back
yeah.
to behavior
Yep.
modification.
Yep. 100%.
And trying to avoid, I have to just avoid being comfortable. And like, how do I, and that's like slapping the Band-Aid on it again. It's like, okay, no, I want more of God. I recognize like the way that I can do that is like, I have to be with him in his work. Yeah. And if I just want to sit here and wait, on the Lord to return until then, like, I get God, like it's a promise, it's a guarantee, the Holy Spirit's in me, but like if I want more, he's working, let me go do it with him. Like if I wanted to be with my dad when I was growing up, I'd have to go work with him because he's working.
Yeah.
But like he's coming back at the end of the day. And like in the same way, we have to, and there's this different experience of him when we are putting ourselves out there on the line, like advancing the gospel, sharing the good news, participating in the work than you would ever get when you just sit, abide with God, like in your living room and you have a comfortable 10 out of 10 life.
Yep. Well, and when you start to see the fruit of what comes from that, then you start to step into it more too.
Totally.
I think one of the things is actually, I'm going to share a story here. Is this last week I was sitting with two other people. We're going to start doing a spiritual gifts class that a gal at the church leads here soon, and she's awesome. It's an incredible class, and I get to step into that with her and another guy this time and help in it.
Cool.
And we were talking. We did this practice where one person was praying over what verse the Lord wanted to share with this person, and one person was praying over what picture that God wanted to give them. And the guy shared this with me, and I just think it applies to what we're talking about. Because in my story, what people would look at, if I'm going to share this on X or Instagram or whatever, it's like, oh, I got divorced. Everything went to crap. I found the Lord. I came back. Now I have a home. Now I have a wife. Now I have a... It's like, okay, well, sweet. Like those things might be coming. But here's why I want to share this picture. So his picture was of a man running a marathon or a long distance race is what he saw.
Already.
Yeah, doesn't it? Yeah.
Ugh.
I know.
Life goal, never to run a marathon.
Yeah, have done it.
Successful so far.
Life goal, probably to not run one again, but we'll see. I've done a half again, but we'll see. But anyways, he's sharing this story, and he said, "What's interesting is I see that you're just in this rhythm, and your heart rate like got to this point, and but then just flattened out, and you're in this rhythm, and you're just running. But then I saw a finish line, and there's joy." And there's excitement. I'll get emotional thinking about it because I do want to be married again. I do want those things again. But then he's like, but then the guy just kept running.
Past the finish line?
Past the finish line. Like there was joy and there was excitement, but then he just kept running. And the Lord like impressed that upon my heart of just, there might be those things coming and there's going to be joy in those moments, but we're just going to keep running. And I'm excited about that. Because, those pieces of my story of redemption and restoration may come, but now that I've stepped into like the fullness of the Lord and wanting the even more fullness of the Lord, that when those joys come, it isn't the end. When those joys come, it's just a gift.
Yeah.
And then we get to keep running and keep going and keep stepping into the uncomfortable and keep, because if I step into another marriage, I guess there's going to be a lot of uncomfortable there, right? Like, because this time we're actually going to I'm going to step into the discomfort and work, with the Lord. So, but I think that's the thing that happens in this life is we do things that are uncomfortable to gain comfort rather than we do it to grow with the Lord or to know the Lord. And He's the God of all comfort. He's the one who's going to bring those things. And so it's not the circumstantial stuff that's going to bring that. And actually, when we chase comfort, a lot of times it brings discomfort.
Expand on that.
That just as if I'm chasing just, I'm going to get a house, get lots of money, be able to sit and do whatever I want, it's easy to just fall into the rhythm of, okay, now I'm watching Netflix every night. Now I'm eating lots of chips and potatoes and whatever, Not the potatoes are bad, but but
I knew what you meant. Potato chips.
It's just funny. I just laugh sometimes. I'm like, oh yeah, that's funny. I'm an overthinker. Classic. It's just it's normal. But we're we get in these places where we want what I would call the American dream, right? We're chasing happiness. And so we chase that comfort, we get that comfort, we sit in comfort. And when I think of comfort, I think of sitting a lot of times, like you're just sitting, doing whatever you want. And then it creates more discomfort because we're not entering into the uncomfortable things, like you're saying with the spiritual walk. We're not entering into the comfortable things that are good, or uncomfortable things that are good for us. And when we do that, like if I don't do the rhythms that God calls me to do, that sometimes are uncomfortable, my soul is off. I start to feel uncomfortable. If I don't go to the gym, my muscles get tight. I get weaker. I don't feel as good.
Yeah.
If I don't eat healthy, eventually I start to not feel as good because I'm chasing comfort, because those are comfort food. Yeah, and things become much harder. And so that's more what I mean in that, is that choosing. Now, would I choose something like someone passing away that was close to me, or those? No, I don't think we want to, I'm not chasing those things, but choosing the uncomfortable of yeah, I would rather do this than this, but this is better for me.
Yeah.
That type of discomfort. Or same with you're talking about evangelism. Yeah, I would rather sit here and go maybe have a cup of coffee with another Christian believer that's going to believe the same things about me, that's not going to rub against it.
Yeah.
But this is the call of the Lord to go, and I want this person to have the gift that I received.
Yeah. Yeah.
So, yeah.
It's just, I think part of it is a short-term perspective, right? And the instant gratification of what is best for me right now is how we process and make a lot of decisions. In a non-spiritual way right now, practically, Rachel and I, my wife, were talking about this yesterday. What is it that causes us in our addictions to stay in them when we know they're not good? Yeah. And it's the reality that right now it's okay. And I want what it's going to offer me right now, even though I know long-term it's going to be a problem. Yeah. But, and we were talking about sugar, okay, I know for a fact that sugar does very little for me, yet I eat all the sweets, and it's why am I killing myself? Yep. Well, because I want the short term versus thinking prudently and long term. And I think the same is true, with evangelism, with anything God asks us. It's but that feels hard right now. I know that only the kingdom of God is eternal. Yeah. But let me build this thing. Yeah. Because I'm going to get the reward for that right now. And just pros and cons, this versus that, short term realization of gain versus that, big picture that you're talking about, and the C.S. Lewis, his last book of the Chronicles of Narnia, one of the lines that gets talked about a lot is onward and upward, further in and further up into the kingdom and into God. And it's an infinite pursuit, and that's where we're headed. And why pursue, like he says in his other quote, why pursue, playing in the mud when a vacation at the sea is offered to us, But we want the thing now that feels good, and so we choose the comfort. Yeah. And the funny thing, and we're going to wrap up right now, as I just felt my watch buzz. So, but that trap of instant gratification is so funny because it's actually not what's better for you in the moment. It feels better in the moment. It's not what's better for us in the moment. It's a feeling. Yeah. And again, I shared this a couple weeks ago with a group of men, is none of us would sin if it didn't feel good. If it didn't offer something, right? It's fake, but it offers something. And so we have to understand that, it might feel good in the moment. When that donut, goes down, it might feel good for a second. Good. It tastes good. Yeah. Maple bar. Yeah, maple bars are the best. And again, it's okay every now and again. But if we're talking sin though, you talk porn, it's going to feel good in the moment because our bodies are wired that way. But it's going to lead to a lot of destruction. Almost immediately after. Yeah, it really is, right? Yeah. That shame just goes. It's you enjoyed that for 5 seconds afterwards, and then it was well, crap. Here I am again. Exactly. Yeah. Exactly. And it just perpetuates that cycle. And so to realize that choosing discomfort in the moment is going to bring good things.
And I think that that's where it starts to help us to switch that thinking, to know that we're not just choosing discomfort to choose discomfort. If there was nothing that came from discomfort, we would not choose it, right? It's the same thing with the Lord. And we don't choose the Lord for his gifts. We choose the Lord for him. Mm-hmm. And that's what we want to get to.
Yeah.
Is why we're choosing it for him. But in that, he still gives us things with it. Like himself
Well,
is
that's part of why we choose him. He's
Yeah.
a generous, loving God.
Yeah. Because who he is peace. Who he is love.
Right.
And so when we choose that discomfort and do those things that are uncomfortable, he's going to give us those things. Mm-hmm. And those things are going to come even more so as we continue to step into that and step into those rhythms. So, so as we wrap up, I think this could be one of those discussions that just continues to go down different rabbit holes, especially with instant gratification. I love talking about that versus long.
To be continued?
Yeah, maybe a to be continued for next week. So, hey, tune in. But I do want to end here and just share again about our community. We have a True Roots community. Would love to have you in there we talked about on episode 1 about the belief matrix, where you can dispel lies, replace them with truth. We'll send that to you. If you join the community, we'll send that to you for free. And just thank you for listening, and we'll be back next week.
Have a great week.